Hey my dear data friends, it's Nicola from Data Mozart. Microsoft just announced a brand new solution for data analytics workloads. It's called Microsoft Fabric. So in this video, we will take a look at what Microsoft Fabric is and how your organization can maybe benefit from using this brand new solution. Stay tuned. How many times have you seen a diagram like this? Or maybe something like this? Looks too complex and overwhelming. Yes, to me too. I feel your pain. In real life, more often than not, this is exactly how the data looks across enterprises. Disparate data sources, various ETL tools used to ingest and transform the data, data silos all across the organization, while numerous teams within the organization leverage a bunch of different tools to prepare the data that will be consumed by business users and executives. If I ask you, where does the specific number in the report come from? How has it been calculated? Looking at one of the diagrams that I shown you, how easy and straightforward would it be for you to find an answer? On the other hand, it's not all about the specific tools and vendors used. It's also about the people. There are many different data personas within the organization. These individuals possess a different set of skills. Their tasks are quite diverse, and finally, they need to answer different business questions and comply with different business processes. So, the valid concern is how to enable all data personas in the organization to thrive while delivering quick, efficient, and accurate solutions. Simply said, how to provide them with a platform for creating robust, flexible, and secure data workloads. Tag along with watching and you will understand why Microsoft Fabric may be the answer to these questions. What is a Microsoft Fabric in the first place? I'll start with the analogy. I'm a huge football fan, or soccer if you prefer. So in a football team, you have players with different characteristics, playing in different positions, possessing different sets of skills. For example, you have very fast players that can play on wings and utilize their speed to create chances for their team. Then, you have strong and tireless players who can excel in defense. You also need a goalkeeper to protect your team from the opponent's attacks. Finally, you have players who are skilled to score goals. Now, imagine yourself being a coach of this team. So, you have all these players at your disposal, and your task is to establish the system that best fits your players, with winning the match as the ultimate goal. Think of Fabric as the data football team. So, Microsoft provides you with the players, and your task is to integrate these players into the system that will ensure success. These players are already well-known seasoned stars, such as Power BI, Azure Synapse Analytics, and Azure Data Factory. But there are also some fresh faces, newcomers that should bring fresh blood to your experienced team. We'll examine most of these players in this series of videos. At this moment, it's important to understand that Microsoft Fabric is not some new fancy tool or product. It's a suite of individual analytic tools and services that work in synergy to provide a unified analytics experience. Now, you're probably wondering, wait, wasn't Azure Synapse Analytics labeled as a solution to provide a unified analytics experience a few years ago? Yes, you're right. So we now have another unified analytics solution, Microsoft Fabric, that unifies one of the previous unified solutions, Azure Synapse Analytics. Sounds confusing, I know, but don't blame me, blame Microsoft. What does unified mean in the context of Microsoft Fabric? It's about the unified experience. Whether you look at a single workspace experience, single sign-on experience, single storage format, all the way to single experience for managing security and collaboration. This is a high-level overview of our data team under the Fabric umbrella. You might rightly assume that some players simply changed their shirts, but their skill set and strengths remain the same. So, is the Microsoft Fabric just a rebranding of the existing Microsoft data offering? Well, to some extent yes, but there are certain features and capabilities that are brand new and promising. Keep watching and we'll come to explain these in more detail. Okay, that was the unification from the service level perspective. From the professional level perspective, we can talk about the unification from the perspective of different personas in the data world. Remember when we were talking about different players on the team? You may have business intelligence professionals coming from a traditional relational databases background, then data engineers, data scientists, or data analysts. All these personas can leverage this unified fabric experience to play to their strengths. What are the key pillars of Microsoft Fabric? Number one, everything as a service. Simply said, it just works. You don't need to care about the hardware, infrastructure, or complex administration. By taking advantage of the instant provisioning and straightforward onboarding, the focus can be shifted to the data analysis itself, ensuring that business can quickly get results. In this scenario, the integration and optimization happen automatically. Number two, centralized administration. The idea is to govern one tenant, which contains all organizational data artifacts. So various data professionals across the organization don't need to worry about security or compliance challenges because everything is handled in one place. Number three, low code plus pro development. In large enterprises, it's always this kind of challenge. There are many more business users around, self-service users, that can't rely on the small number of professional developers to meet all their requirements. So the idea is to enable business users to move forward without waiting for professional Synapse or Spark developers. It's a win-win scenario where business is not blocked in the process of performing data analysis, while professional developers may spend more time on doing the hard, more code-intensive stuff in the background. Number four, Lake. Data Lake is at the core and center of the Microsoft Fabric. And since we were talking about the unified experience, how would that experience work without the unified lake? Or one lake if you prefer that name. I would say Microsoft prefers that name because this is the official name of this software as a service solution. Do you know what is OneDrive? Oh, yeah, of course you do. Think of OneLake as OneDrive for all your organizational data artifacts. Now, think of all the various analytic engines that are part of the fabric. SQL, Spark, Real-Time Analytics or Custo, and all the different applications that are reliant on accessing the data in the most efficient way. Meaning reducing data duplication and data movement across different services. Additionally, think of all the different personas in the organization. Providing business insight from the raw data is a team effort, which requires collaboration between various data professionals. Enabling all these individuals and teams to work synchronously is one of the key advantages of OneLake. Simply said, it's a logical structure of files and folders that may point to disparate data sources. So your data might be coming from Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, but also from other vendors such as Amazon or Google. From the end user's perspective, they're just navigating through the files and folders in OneLake as a logical layer between the data source and the final data destination, which can be, for example, a Power BI report. From a conceptual point of view, this is a data mesh architecture where every department within the organization can manage their data as a product. However, since we are talking about the unified experience, it's still easy to bring the data, mesh it up, and get together across the entire organization. Number 5. Lakehouse is the architecture of choice. Nowadays, there is an ongoing debate in the analytics world. Data Lakehouse versus Data Warehouse. Explaining the pros and cons of each of these concepts is out of the scope of this video, as well as providing the answer to which one is better. We are examining Microsoft Fabric, so we'll stick with the facts. And the fact is that the Lakehouse is the architecture of choice in Fabric. Although Microsoft makes a distinction between the Lakehouse and warehouse analytics scenarios, in my opinion this separation just introduces confusion. And let me explain why. In today's cloud analytical landscape, we have a separation between the storage and compute layers. If we are talking about storage, Data Lakehouse means that your data is stored as files in the lake. When I say in files, I mean in ACID-compliant Delta Lake format. Then you can choose between different engines like Spark, Polaris, and so on to process, read-write files in that storage. And in Microsoft Fabric, the storage layer is Lake. To be more precise, one lake, which we previously examined. Therefore, don't be baffled when you hear someone talking about data warehousing in Microsoft Fabric. It's still a lake in the background as a storage layer, but the engine, in this case it's Polaris engine that we already know from serverless SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics. And data manipulation, they're SQL flavored. Basically, you have a lake with a SQL querying layer on the top. More on the data warehouse and data lakehouse scenarios in one of the next videos. Number 6, aimed at a variety of data personas. Going back to my analogy with the football team and its players, do you have a player who is great with their left foot? Your equivalent data player who is, for example, proficient in writing Python code? Or do you have a player who is a great free kick shooter? The equivalent data player who is skilled in SQL language? Do you want your team to play with more attacking formation? For example, using more Spark in the workloads? Or do you prefer a more conservative approach, sticking with the SQL way of data manipulation? The choice is yours, but whatever you choose, you have one single copy of the data and all your players can leverage this one single copy. And based on the specific analytic task that needs to be performed, you may choose between multiple Fabric engines. The key thing to keep in mind is that once the data is stored in one lake, it can be directly accessed by all the engines without needing to copy or move the data from the lake. Number 7, DirectLake is the revolution. Now, if you're a Power BI professional like me, you are probably wondering, wait, does that mean that we don't need to copy the data from the lake into Power BI, meaning using import mode? Can we query this data directly from the lake, meaning using direct query mode? The answer to both questions is yes. You don't need to copy the data from one lake to the instance of the analysis services tabular behind Power BI. Okay, Nicola, that's nice, but if I choose a direct query option, I'll have to pay all the penalties and live with all the limitations when using direct query. Well, not really. In my opinion, one of the key enhancements that Fabric brings into the data analytics world is DirectLake mode. Why is it so special? Because now the Power BI analysis services engine can do the same as SQL and Spark engines. Directly access the data in one lake. This data that is stored in Delta and Parquet format files. And it can consume data directly from there without any data movement, while achieving the same performance level as when using the import mode. At least that's what Microsoft proclaims. I still need to test this. To simplify, you get the performance of import mode without copying the data, while at the same time having real-time data available in your Power BI reports. This sounds like a heaven, and I can't wait to test this in real-life scenarios. Number 8, seamless integration with other Office tools. So once you create your data story using Power BI, as you may assume, this story can be seamlessly integrated with other Office tools such as Excel, PowerPoint, Teams, Outlook, and so on. Number 9, security and governance, another extremely important topic that may become more straightforward with Microsoft Fabric. Data lineage and Microsoft information protection labels, to name a few, are fully supported in Fabric. So if you mark something as highly confidential, this label will be applied to every data artifact moving through the system. Finally, you have the admin center, which serves as a centralized location for all administrative tasks such as tenant settings, networking stuff, usage metrics, and so on. As already mentioned, Microsoft Fabric is a lake-centric solution. This means one lake is the focal point and central repository for storing all organizational data. So, in its essence, Fabric is a Lakehouse architecture, since the data is stored in the lake in Delta Parquet file format, and from there can be processed by using any engine or tool capable of reading Delta format. At this moment, Microsoft Fabric offers you two possibilities for handling these workloads. Lakehouse, in this scenario, data is loaded, transformed, and curated by leveraging Spark notebooks. And Warehouse, in this scenario, data is loaded, transformed, and curated by leveraging the T-SQL language. Obviously, this is a high-level distinction, and there are many more nuances between these two that I will cover in one of the next videos. The storage layer for both scenarios is the same, one lake, and the storage format is the same, Delta file format. Therefore, a valid question would be, which should I use? As per my understanding, the key criteria should be the skill set and/or preferences of your data engineering team. If the majority of your team consists of Spark engineers, your default choice should be Lakehouse. On the flip side, if your team feels more comfortable using traditional T-SQL for data workloads, then you should go the data warehouse path. The good thing is that the Lakehouse, which is Spark, exposes a SQL endpoint, so you can also leverage T-SQL to query the data stored in Spark tables. I've intentionally emphasized the word query, as in this scenario, when you're using T-SQL over Delta files stored in the Lakehouse, there is a limited set of T-SQL features supported. For example, no data manipulation language operations are allowed, inserts, updates, deletes, but you can still create views and table value functions, similarly to current setup in serverless SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics. The next fair question would be, what if my data engineering team consists of mixed professionals? Let's say a data engineer that loads the data is proficient with Spark, and then the other data persona responsible for curating that data wants to use SQL. Does that mean that I need to copy the data from the Lakehouse, Bronze, or Raw layer into the warehouse so that SQL professional can continue curating the data and preparing it for the Silver and Gold layers? The answer is no. Fabric supports cross-database queries, so in theory you can do something like this. The only prerequisite is that tables in both Data Warehouse and Lakehouse are in Delta format. CSV and Parquet are not supported for this scenario. Performance-wise, there is no difference if you are querying the data directly from the warehouse versus data in the Lakehouse, because, as we already learned, all of these tables are stored in the end in one lake as a central storage repository. What now for Azure Synapse Analytics? This is definitely a million-dollar question. Not so long ago, Azure Synapse Analytics was hailed by Microsoft as a solution to unify all your data analytic workloads and enable building end-to-end analytics solution from one central place. Does this sound familiar? So the question is, will Microsoft slowly shut down Synapse by drowning it into the new data ocean called Microsoft Fabric? Well, honestly, I don't know. As of today, looks like dedicated SQL and serverless SQL pool are somehow integrated into one solution in Microsoft Fabric. We are talking about data warehouse in Microsoft Fabric. So we have traditional structures from dedicated SQL pool, such as column store indexes, data cache, and similar. At the same time, Warehouse relies on the Polaris engine, which currently powers the serverless SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics. This is an MPP, or massively parallel processing engine, which scales automatically to support various data workloads. In other words, no more data warehouse units, whereas scaling out is now done by the engine, not by someone from your data team. There is still no result set cache at this moment, but I've been told that it's coming soon. To wrap up, I really don't see any reason for new customers to choose Azure Synapse Analytics over Microsoft Fabric, except maybe costs, because in some scenarios it may happen that prudent usage of data warehouse units in dedicated SQL pool, in combination with a pay-per-query model of the Synapse serverless SQL pool, will cost you less than Microsoft Fabric. For existing Azure Synapse Analytics users, there will be the option to integrate current Synapse workspaces into the new Fabric experience, but more on that in one of the next videos. Personally, this is one of the areas I'm mostly interested in, and I'm really curious to see what the future brings for Azure Synapse Analytics. To conclude, not many technical announcements produced more hype than the Fabric one at Microsoft Build, and for a good reason, I would say. Even though most of the platform was already there, and it might look that Microsoft simply rebranded the product once again, there are certain features and concepts that can really change the analytics game we play now. In the first place, I'm talking about the DirectLake mode in Power BI, which potentially elevates the whole landscape into another dimension. However, by performing comprehensive performance tests, we can really confirm if this feature wins against the import mode, which is the current de facto standard for Power BI performance. Obviously, Microsoft Fabric is still a work in progress. Hey, it's been just announced and is still in public preview. This means that many features will be added, improved, adjusted in the coming months. So let's wait for the final judgment. However, the overall Fabric idea and concepts around it testify that Microsoft does not have any plans to surrender its leading position in the enterprise data analytics world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click this like button or consider subscribing to Data Mozart channel. See you soon.